The blizzard hit New York City with the kind of force that made the entire skyline disappear behind a curtain of white, the kind of storm that silenced even the loudest corners of Manhattan. But nothing felt silent tonight, not around Hale Tower. At the base of the 89-floor building where billionaire Ethan Hale lived, hundreds of people had gathered despite the freezing wind. Reporters shouted over one another. Paparazzi bulbs flashed in frantic bursts. TikTok streamers held their phones up with shaking hands as snow piled on their sleeves. Even the police barriers trembled as the crowd pushed forward for a better angle. The story had exploded across social media only 20 minutes earlier. A viral headline pulsed across every screen like a spell cast over the entire city. Billionaire Ethan Hale caught having an affair with his maid. Under it, the leaked footage played on a loop. A shaky security camera clip from the hallway outside the penthouse. Lena Rivera stepping out of Ethan Hale's door at 1:47 in the morning, wrapped in the black winter coat that clearly belonged to him. Her hair messy, her cheeks flushed from cold or something more. Her eyes looking down as she hurried toward the private elevator. 30 seconds of grainy video had been enough to light the internet on fire, enough to drag a billionaire into scandal, enough to destroy a maid's life. Inside the penthouse, high above the chaos, Lena stood barefoot on the polished wood floor, staring out the glass wall as snow spiraled past the windows like white ashes. Her hands trembled violently. Her breath fogged the glass. The city below glimmered through the blizzard like a broken constellation, and somewhere down there, thousands of strangers were already posting opinions about her, judging her, mocking her, calling her names she could never have imagined being tied to her face. She pressed both hands to her mouth as if trying to hold in the shaking, but tears kept sliding down her cheeks, warm against the freezing night. Behind her, Ethan stepped forward through the dim penthouse, his silhouette tall and tense and outlined by the faint Christmas lights she had convinced him to plug in earlier that evening. He reached her in 2 long strides and gently pulled her away from the window, his palm warm on her arm. Lena breathed sharply, as if trying not to break in half, and Ethan whispered close to her ear, "Lena, please look at me." She shook her head and tried to pull away, but he held her with the kind of careful strength that said he knew she was seconds from collapsing. "The footage was leaked," she whispered, voice cracking. "Everyone thinks I was in your bed. They think I planned all of this. They think I am some kind of holiday girl trying to trap you." Snow pounded against the glass like a frantic heartbeat. Ethan cupped her jaw with both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Lena, none of that matters. I swear I will fix this. I will protect you. You have my word." Her lips parted in disbelief, her tears reflecting the city lights. Ethan, the world, already chose the version of the story they want. They do not care about the truth. They only care about the spectacle. She stepped back, arms wrapped around herself. The coat she had worn in the video still lay on the floor behind them, a black silhouette against the bright snow falling outside. She stared at it as if it were some cursed object that had rewritten her entire future. Down below, the noise of the crowd intensified. Reporters shouted his name, her name, demanding statements, demanding answers no one up here was ready to give. Ethan moved closer. His voice was low, rough, and full of a fear he did not know how to hide. "Lena, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. I let this happen. I will clear your name. I promise you." She looked at him, then really looked, and for a moment the storm outside seemed to echo the storm inside her. Her voice was soft trembling. "You cannot protect me from what the world thinks they saw." Her words struck him like a physical blow. She stepped away from him again, back toward the window where the blizzard roared like a warning. The leaked video continued playing on every device in Manhattan, each replay adding more fuel to the frenzy below. Her face, his coat, a moment that had not meant what the world decided it meant. A moment that should have been private, a moment that should have stayed between two lonely people on a cold December night. Ethan whispered her name once more, but this time she did not turn. Her shoulders shook. Her breath fogged the glass again. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red through her tears. For a long beat, the only sound was the storm. Then the scene faded to black. 3 weeks earlier, Lena Rivera had always believed New York in December carried two different hearts. One belonged to the city. Everyone photographed the glittering avenue lights, the storefront wreaths, the giant tree at Rockefeller that shimmered like a promise. The other heart belonged to the real New York, the one she lived in, the one where people worked double shifts, rode late-night subways that rattled like old bones, and held onto small moments of warmth like lifelines. She was part of that second New York, the one built on quiet resilience. At 24, Lena worked 3 jobs to support herself and her mother, who had immigrated from the Dominican Republic years earlier, with nothing but 2 suitcases and a fierce belief that America could still be a land of possibility if you were willing to survive the cold long enough. Lena worked mornings at a small bakery in the Bronx, afternoons, part-time at a holiday market stall, selling hand-painted ornaments, and nights as a contracted seasonal cleaner for a luxury building management company. December always brought more work than she could handle and more exhaustion than she could name, yet it was still her favorite month. Christmas meant warmth, even when there was no heat in the apartment. Hope even when money was too tight, and magic even when life felt merciless. Her mother always said Christmas was the season God used to open doors no one else could. Lena clung to that belief harder every year. On the first Monday of December, she received a message from her supervisor about a new assignment that paid double holiday rate. The location was Hale Tower in Midtown Manhattan, a building she had only seen from far below on nights she closed her mother's kitchen window to block out the cold. The message said the penthouse occupant required holiday cleaning during evening hours, and she would need to sign a non-disclosure form before entering. That part did not surprise her. Rich people guarded their privacy like treasure chests. She took the job immediately. She had no idea then that accepting it would alter the course of her life. The first night she arrived, the sky was a deep velvet gray, and the wind felt sharp enough to slice through her coat. She clutched her Metro card tightly inside her glove as she rode up from the subway platform, then crossed the avenue with her head tucked low against the wind boots slipping slightly on the icy sidewalk. Hale Tower rose above her like a glass monolith, its surface shimmering with reflections of the city lights. Inside the lobby, she paused breathless, staring up at the marble columns and crystal fixtures that looked more like an art museum than an apartment building. The concierge checked her ID, handed her a badge, and directed her to the private elevator on the far right. She had to swipe twice before the doors slid open with a soft chime. As the elevator began its ascent, her stomach tightened. 89 floors. She tried not to imagine the kind of person who lived at the top of a tower like this. When the doors opened, she stepped into a hallway lined with muted lighting and a long runner rug that seemed far too expensive for anyone to ever walk on. Her footsteps were silent on the plush fabric. She approached the last door on the left penthouse one and tapped gently. The door opened just far enough for her to glimpse him, Ethan Hale. She recognized him immediately from magazine covers and the framed Forbes article that hung inside the bakery office where she worked mornings. Ethan Hale, the December miracle. The tech visionary who had turned a failing startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire before he was even 35. She remembered a headline about him last winter. The widowed billionaire who has not celebrated Christmas since his wife's death. The photo had shown him looking away, from the camera expression distant, almost frozen. Tonight he looked nearly the same, tall, impeccably dressed in black hair, slightly unruly as if he had run his fingers through it one too many times, eyes sharp and cool but shadowed with exhaustion. He stepped aside to let her in without greeting. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "You must be Lena. Follow the rules outlined in the contract. Do not open the glass cabinet. Do not adjust the lighting. Do not play music. And please do not touch any boxes stored in the West Wing." She nodded quickly, gripping her cleaning tote. "Yes, sir, of course." The penthouse stretched open around her like another world, polished floors, wide rooms filled with expensive furniture, arranged with perfect precision and full-length glass walls, offering a dizzying view of Manhattan. It felt impossibly large, yet strangely empty, as if it had been designed for a life that was no longer here. She noticed a stack of untouched Christmas boxes in the corner near the hallway. One box had a ripped corner, revealing a glimpse of evergreen branches and a silver ornament inside. She instinctively smiled at it, but the smile faded when she caught Ethan's expression tightening. "Do not touch that." Her cheeks warmed. "Sorry, I will not." He nodded curtly and walked away, his footsteps echoing faintly in the vast room. She watched him go and felt something she could not name. Loneliness. The kind that existed even in the most luxurious spaces, the kind that wrapped around a person like a ghost. She spent the next 2 hours cleaning quietly. The silence in the penthouse felt heavy, almost oppressive, and she found herself glancing toward the hallway, where the Christmas boxes sat like abandoned memories. When she stepped near the tall glass wall, she paused. Below her, the entire city glowed in shades of gold and blue snow, falling like powdered light over the streets. It was beautiful, more beautiful than any Christmas movie she had grown up watching. Yet behind her, she could sense Ethan's presence, standing still on the opposite side of the room, watching the city with an expression that held no warmth. In that moment, Lena realized she was standing inside a kingdom built of glass and shadows, and its lone king had forgotten what Christmas felt like. She had no idea how deeply that truth would draw her into his life. Ethan Hale had once been the kind of man newspapers called charmed, the kind of man television hosts described as golden, the kind of man investors trusted, simply because he walked into a room with a quiet confidence that made everyone else believe in the impossible. Before the tragedy, There was not a single December when he was not photographed somewhere in Manhattan with his late wife Emery Hale, the woman who had softened every edge of his driven personality. Images of them used to fill the internet each winter, strolling through Bryant Park in matching scarves, sipping hot chocolate from a vendor in Soho, or laughing in front of the giant Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center, while snowflakes landed on her eyelashes. They had met in that same park 5 years earlier, when Emery had slipped on the ice and accidentally collided with him, sending the paper bag of handcrafted ornaments she had been carrying tumbling across the ground. Ethan had knelt to gather them without saying a word, his cheeks red from the cold, and when he looked up, she teased him for walking, like a man too busy controlling the world to watch where he was going. She tossed a fistful of snow at his chest and dared him to throw one back. He never did. He only smiled a real unguarded smile that he had not shown anyone else in years. People said Ethan had been reborn that winter. He married Emery a year later and bought the penthouse at Hale Tower, specifically because she loved the idea of watching snowstorms from high above the city. He used to tell her that New York looked different when she was near, as if the lights shone brighter just to impress her. But everything changed on Christmas Eve 2 years earlier. Emery had gone out alone to pick up a last-minute gift for their niece. Ethan had been in the middle of a heated conference call about a merger that would later make national headlines. She had kissed his cheek before leaving and said the snow was too beautiful to ignore, that she would only be gone for 20 minutes. She never came back. The taxi she was riding in had skidded on black ice near the Brooklyn Bridge, colliding with a delivery truck. The world lost her instantly. Ethan lost everything. The news had spread across every channel as if the entire city needed to mourn with him, as if repeating the story could somehow make it less cruel. Reporters gathered outside hospitals. Headlines screamed tragedy. The photo of Ethan standing alone at the crash site with snow melting in his hair became one of the most circulated images of the year. After the funeral, he disappeared from public view for months. Investors panicked. Journalists speculated. Those who worked closest to him whispered that something inside him had shattered in a way that could never be fully repaired. When he returned to Hale Technologies, he worked with a new intensity that bordered on self-destruction. He slept in his office. He ate only when his assistant reminded him. He shut down conversations about holidays forcing employees to remove festive decorations every December. He attended meetings with the cold detachment of a man who no longer felt tethered to the world around him. Yet in his presence there remained a faint echo of the warmth he once carried, an echo that only revealed itself in rare, unguarded moments. His employees learned to avoid discussing Christmas entirely. The holiday became a forbidden topic inside every building he owned. That first year after Emery's death, he donated an entire warehouse of holiday decor to charity without ever opening the boxes. The second year, he had the staff seal every memory of Christmas inside the penthouse's west wing, the wing Lena had been warned never to enter. The ornament boxes, the photo albums, the custom wreaths Emery had made. Everything that once symbolized joy now symbolized loss so heavy it threatened to crush him. Whenever December approached, Ethan changed. His posture stiffened, his gaze hardened. Even his voice deepened in a way that made people step back. Grief had reshaped him like ice, reshapes the edge of a river slowly but relentlessly. Still, despite the walls he built, the world continued trying to pull him back into the spotlight. Forbes published a feature calling him Silicon Valley's December miracle because he had tripled the company's value after his personal tragedy. Investors praised him, analysts admired him, but none of them knew he spent nights in the penthouse, staring out the window toward the Brooklyn Bridge, haunted by the sound of sirens that sometimes echoed through winter air. None of them knew he still blamed himself for letting Emery leave that night. None of them knew he could not bring himself to touch a Christmas ornament, not even the one with their names engraved on it. The ornament he kept inside a small box with a cracked corner. The same box Lena almost brushed that first night. When she had reached toward it, his reaction had been instant and fierce. The sight of her fingers near that fragile piece of memory had struck him like a shock, not because she meant any harm, but because his grief lived inside that box coiled so tightly it could erupt if disturbed. He saw her startled expression and regretted the sharpness of his voice, but he could not apologize. Apologies required vulnerability, and he had not allowed himself to be vulnerable since the night the world ended. What surprised him, however, was the way Lena's presence unsettled something inside him. She moved through the penthouse with gentle purpose, not tiptoeing the way others did, but not intruding either. She hummed under her breath, sometimes soft melodies he did not recognize, and he caught himself listening even when he pretended not to. She smiled at the city as if it were a friend, rather than a beast that demanded too much. He had not met anyone who still believed in joy so earnestly. Watching her reminded him of the life he once lived, the one where December meant laughter and fireplaces, and cold cheeks pressed together in photographs taken under falling snow. He tried not to notice her. He tried not to feel the echo of something warming at the edges of his grief. But grief is strange. Sometimes it reaches a point where the slightest touch can crack it open again, letting in a sliver of light. Lena did not know it yet, but her presence was already pressing against the edges of Ethan's frozen world, and Christmas, the season he hated most, was slowly circling back toward him in ways neither of them could predict. The second week of December arrived with a softer kind of snowfall, the kind that floated rather than fell, drifting through the sky like tiny pieces of feathered light. It coated the windows of the penthouse in a thin veil of white, and each time Lena stepped inside for her evening shift, she paused for a brief moment to take in the view. She found herself developing a quiet ritual. She would set down her tote peel off her gloves and stand before the glass wall just long enough to inhale the cold beauty outside before beginning her work. The penthouse remained exactly as she first encountered it, a kingdom of immaculate surfaces and precise symmetry, almost too perfect to feel alive. And yet, she had begun noticing small details, things she had missed before. The faint ring on the coffee table, where a mug had once sat too long. The slight dent on the left cushion of the sofa, the one shape that hinted someone had spent many nights sitting alone. The blanket folded with obsessive precision, but worn at the edges, as if it had been used far more than the pristine room suggested. Ethan often returned home late, usually stepping through the penthouse doors with the kind of tiredness that clung to him like a shadow. Sometimes he nodded at her in greeting, sometimes he simply walked past without a word. But on this particular evening, He paused in the kitchen, loosening the collar of his coat as if he needed air. Lena was wiping the marble counter when he spoke. You do not have to clean that corner every day. It is spotless. She turned toward him, surprised he had noticed her routine. Habit, she said, shrugging. My mother always says you can tell who a person is by how they maintain a kitchen. He blinked, unsure whether to consider it small talk or philosophy. And what do you think this kitchen says about me? She hesitated only a second. It says you work too much. It says you forget to eat. And it says you live in a beautiful home that is somehow still empty. Ethan stared at her, caught off guard by the honesty. Most people tiptoed around him, choosing safe words that never touched the truth. But Lena said what she saw. She always had. He stepped closer to the counter, setting down his gloves. You put something here yesterday. A small red and white stick. She laughed softly. A candy cane. It is Christmas. It felt wrong having a kitchen without even one sign of the season. He opened the trash bin with a pressing of his foot, then reached inside. He held up the candy cane she thought he had thrown away. She stared at it, startled, and something warm flickered inside her chest. You kept it. I found myself looking for it after I tossed it. He sounded almost confused by his own confession. It felt strange not seeing it there. She smiled and gently placed it back on the counter where it had been before. It looks better here anyway. The air between them shifted subtle but unmistakable, like the crack of light that slips beneath a closed door. He watched her fingers linger on the peppermint stripes, and for the first time his gaze softened without resistance. She tried to focus on her work, but she could feel him watching her. As she moved around the kitchen, the silence no longer cold but contemplative. Later, while she wiped down the living room table, she suddenly sensed him approach the window. Ethan stood with both hands in his pockets, staring out at the city in a way that seemed less haunted than usual. You like winter, he said quietly. She nodded. I do. Winter feels honest. It strips the world down, so only the strongest parts remain. Snow makes even the hardest places look hopeful. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her. I used to think that too. Before. Lena did not ask him to explain. She knew enough from newspapers and gossip enough from the sadness that clung to him like frost on a window pane. Instead, she stepped beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them, and looked out at the city the same way he did. The city glittered below them, cars moving like lines of fire through the snowy streets, the river flowing dark and silent in the distance. It was breathtaking in a way that made even the coldest hearts pause. She held her warm breath close as she stood there, her presence, gentle but steady. Ethan glanced at her hand, resting on the railing of the window ledge. Without thinking, he allowed his own hand to edge slightly closer, though not enough to touch. She pretended not to notice, but her heartbeat changed. The snowfall thickened, brushing the glass with soft patterns. She whispered, "Snow looks kinder from up here." Kinder, but no less dangerous. His voice held a quiet warning, as if he spoke of something larger than weather. Somewhere inside him, he knew he was letting her into a place he had not allowed anyone since Emery died. When she turned back toward him, their faces were closer than either expected. He stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. "You said you work at a holiday market?" She nodded. "I paint ornaments, hand-painted. People love them during December. Do you like doing it?" "Sometimes. Art feels like freedom." She said it with a softness that made him look at her again. Really look. For the first time, he wondered what dreams she carried beneath the exhaustion of 3 jobs. Do you still have any of your ornaments? She thought for a moment, then reached into her tote and pulled out a small box, one of the last she had not yet sold. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a single ornament painted with the Manhattan skyline, dusted with tiny white dots of falling snow. Ethan stared at it for several seconds. It was simple, beautiful, painful. He swallowed memories of Emery brushing against the corners of his mind, threatening to pull him under again. But he did not look away. Instead, he closed the small box slowly and handed it back to Lena. It is beautiful. She smiled, a real one that reached her eyes, and for the first time, Ethan felt something inside him shift the slightest loosening of the ice that had encased his heart for 2 long winters. She returned to her work, humming softly as she moved through the rooms. He listened to her voice fading in and out, blending with the sound of snowfall. That night when she left, he walked into the kitchen after she was gone. His gaze landed on the candy cane she placed earlier. For a long moment, he simply stared at it. Then he picked it up, placed it carefully inside the upper cabinet instead of the trash, and closed the door gently, as if sealing away the first crack of light in a long frozen winter. The storm rolled into New York with a warning so sharp that every news anchor repeated the same phrase, in urgent tones, a blizzard classified as level 3, the kind that freezes subway tracks, shuts down bridges, and forces entire neighborhoods to shelter in place. By the time Lena arrived for her shift, snow was already swirling in chaotic circles around Hale Tower, the wind howling between skyscrapers with a force that turned umbrellas inside out and knocked hats off strangers' heads. She pushed through the revolving doors, breathless, brushing snow from her coat as the lobby guard shook his head. "You cut it close," he told her. "They are shutting down the elevators any minute." The city declared a travel freeze. Anyone inside the building must stay until conditions change. She nodded, heart racing. The pay was good, but not good enough to risk freezing on the street. She hurried toward the private elevator, swiped her badge, and stepped inside just before the doors sealed with a soft mechanical clang. When she reached the 89th floor, she stepped out into a dim hallway lit only by emergency bulbs. The main lights flickered irregularly, threatened by the storm's power surges. She knocked once on the penthouse door. It opened almost instantly. Ethan stood there with a look she had not seen on him before, a mixture of worry and relief wrapped under his usual stoic exterior. "You should not have come," he said quietly. "It is dangerous out there." She brushed melting snow from her hair and offered a small smile. "My shift started at 7. I could not just not show up." His jaw tensed as if he wanted to argue, but had no words to justify it. He stepped aside and let her in. The moment she crossed the threshold, a loud rumble of wind shook the glass walls, making the entire penthouse vibrate slightly. She froze. Is that normal for buildings this tall? Ethan glanced at the windows, as if calculating the structural integrity in his mind. Mostly. But this storm is stronger than usual. City protocol halted the elevators. No one is allowed to leave until further notice. You will have to stay here tonight. The words did not carry seduction or invitation, only simple truth. Still, her breath hitched for a moment before she nodded. "Then I guess I should make myself useful." She set down her tote and slipped off her gloves. the penthouse lights flickered again, dimming until only half the room glowed. A few seconds later, the glow dropped entirely, leaving them in near darkness, except for the faint, golden emergency lights, automatically activated in case of outages. Ethan moved through the room with practiced calm and retrieved a set of tall candles from a kitchen drawer. As he lit them one by one, soft circles of warm light bloomed across the marble countertops and danced against the glass walls. Shadows flickered around them like old ghosts returning from sleep. The sudden intimacy of dim candlelight made the space feel less like a sterile palace and more like something fragile and human. Lena watched him as he worked. For a man who avoided Christmas decor and holiday magic, he handled candlelight with surprising gentleness. She sensed it again, the undercurrent of sorrow woven beneath everything he did. The wind howled against the glass, followed by a loud metallic groan from somewhere deeper in the building. Ethan paused mid-stride. "That was the backup generator adjusting," he said, though his voice held a tremor he tried to mask. "Are you afraid of the dark?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He stiffened, gaze locked on the faint reflections in the glass. "My wife died during a power outage." The silence that followed was heavy but not cold. Lena did not respond with pity. Instead, she whispered, "Do you want me to do something? Sometimes grounding helps." He blinked as if surprised by her instinct to understand instead of intrude. "What do you mean? My mother used to sing when I was little whenever the lights went out." It made the shadows feel less lonely. Ethan's breath hitched slightly. She stepped closer, bracing herself on the edge of the counter. Softly she began to sing a lullaby in Spanish, her voice low and warm, a soothing melody that seemed to wrap itself around the flickering candle flames. The notes drifted through the penthouse like a blanket of calm, steady, and gentle. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, as if anchoring himself to the sound. The storm continued to roar outside, but inside something softened. When she finished the lullaby, she stepped back, embarrassed by how exposed she felt. Sorry if that was strange. Ethan shook his head slowly. It was not strange. It helped. "Thank you." For the first time since she met him, he looked at her not as an employee, but as a presence. He needed someone who eased the tension in the air simply by breathing. As the night deepened, the storm intensified. Snow slammed against the glass. In frantic bursts, lightning flickered beyond the clouds, and the emergency lights dimmed twice, each time drawing Lena and Ethan closer together in instinctive silence. A sudden crash outside made Lena jump. A piece of scaffolding from a nearby building broke loose and slammed into the lower structure. Ethan steadied her with one hand on her shoulder. "It is all right. You are safe here." The warmth of his hand lingered long after he released her. Hours passed. She cleaned what she could by candlelight, moving slowly through the penthouse. Ethan sat near the window, watching the snowstorm swallow the skyline. The loneliness on his face was unmistakable, a loneliness carved from years of grief. Eventually, she joined him. They sat in silence, staring out at the blizzard from 90 stories above, a city that seemed both enormous and impossibly small. She said quietly, "It is strange. Storms can trap you, but sometimes they keep you exactly where you are supposed to be." Ethan looked at her then fully with an intensity that felt like the beginning of something neither of them understood. Maybe he said, his voice lower than before. Or maybe storms show us the things we try hardest to avoid. The candles flickered, the storm raged, and somewhere within the frozen night, two lives began to shift toward each other in ways that would change everything long before sunrise. The storm pressed harder against the penthouse windows as the night deepened, sweeping the skyline into a blur of white and muted gold. The city had disappeared beneath the blizzard, leaving only the sound of relentless wind and the occasional distant groan of metal shifting under the weight of ice. Inside the candle-lit penthouse, a fragile stillness settled between Lena and Ethan, the kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. She had finished cleaning hours ago, but neither of them suggested she retreat to the guest room. Instead, they drifted naturally toward the living area, drawn to the panoramic wall of glass, where snow spiraled in hypnotic patterns. The flickering candles painted amber shadows on their faces, softening Ethan's edges and warming the cool austerity that had always surrounded him like armor. For the first time since she began working for him, Lena saw him not as the untouchable billionaire from magazine covers, but as a man shaped by loss, a man who carried winter inside his chest. He sat on the floor near the window, with his back resting against the couch, long legs stretched out, his gaze fixed on the storm, with an expression that was part memory, part confession. Lena hesitated before lowering herself to sit beside him, maintaining a polite distance, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his body fighting against the cold air. For a long while they said nothing, simply watching the storm consume the city. Then Ethan exhaled slowly, almost painfully. "I should have been with her that night," he murmured. The words were barely above a whisper, as if he feared breaking a spell. She did not ask who. She already knew. Emery? He continued, his voice strained. "She loved Christmas more than anyone. She used to drag me out into the snow just to feel it hit her face. Said it made her feel alive." He swallowed, jaw tightening. "I told her I was too busy. I stayed on a call instead of walking with her. She left alone." Lena turned slightly toward him, her heartbeat tightening in her chest. "Ethan, you cannot blame yourself for an accident. People say that." He kept his gaze forward, eyes distant. "But they do not know the truth. She never should have been out in that storm. The roads were already bad. I should have insisted she stay home. I should have gotten off the call. I should have gone with her. Every should have felt like a blade." Lena hesitated before responding, her voice gentle. "You lost her. That pain will always be there. But punishing yourself will not bring her back." He looked at her for the briefest moment, eyes filled with something raw, fragile, and unbearably human. Before he could reply, the lights flickered again, plunging them into deeper candlelit darkness. A gust of wind slammed against the glass, making Lena flinch. Ethan reached out instinctively and touched her arm, steadying her. His hand lingered. She felt a warm rush beneath her skin, a pull she did not intend to feel, and did not know how to stop. He noticed her breath hitch and withdrew slowly, but the moment had already shifted something between them. She cleared her throat. "You never told me how you met her." Ethan leaned his head back against the couch and closed his eyes for a moment. "She threw a snowball at me." Lena blinked. "Sorry. What?" He opened his eyes, and for the first time she saw a small, reluctant smile. "She missed the trash can in Bryant Park and hit me instead. She apologized by buying me hot chocolate, and by the end of the night, we were talking like we had known each other forever. And you loved her instantly." "I did." She made winter feel warm. The smile faded. After she died, I could not look at anything related to Christmas. Trees, ornaments, snow, even music made me feel like I could not breathe. Lena nodded slowly, and now. He looked at her again, his gaze quieter than his voice. Now I do not know what I am supposed to feel. She felt the weight of his words as if he had handed her a fragile object he had carried too long. She wondered how long he had held all this inside without saying it aloud to anyone. The storm rattled the windows again, and a sudden crack of thunder made her jump. Ethan reached for her a second time, less hesitant, more instinctive. Their shoulders brushed. She felt her pulse race confused and unprepared for the warmth spreading through her. "You should get some sleep," he said softly, though he made no move to stand. She shook her head. "I am not tired. Are you?" He let out a quiet breath. "I have not slept well in years." She looked at him carefully. "Would it be strange if I stayed here a little longer?" His answer came instantly. "No, stay." He shifted, leaning back more comfortably, and she mirrored him. Their bodies relaxed into the same rhythm, the storm's roar blending with the sound of their breathing. Silence wrapped around them again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not haunted, simply full. As minutes passed, her head slowly dropped to the side before resting near his shoulder. She stiffened at first, embarrassed, but Ethan did not move away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly toward hers. "You can rest, Lena," he murmured. "It is all right." His voice was low and warm, lacking the cold precision he usually carried. Hesitant but drawn to him in a way she could no longer deny, Lena let herself lean fully against him. His arm brushed hers, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the winter storm outside. When she closed her eyes, she felt him relax too, his breathing deepening as if her presence eased something inside him. He had been fighting alone for years. Minutes blurred into something softer, something dangerous, something inevitable. When she finally opened her eyes, she found him watching her, his expression unreadable but vulnerable in a way she had never seen. What she asked softly, her breath mixing with his. He shook his head. "Nothing, everything. I should not." Before he could finish, she placed her hand over his. "You are allowed to feel, Ethan. Loss does not mean your heart has to stay buried." His eyes darkened, filled with years of grief, breaking open at once. The space between them dissolved. Slowly, almost painfully, he leaned forward. Their foreheads touched, first a hesitant meeting of two worlds that had no business colliding. Then the moment deepened. He cupped her jaw with trembling control. Lena's breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered his name like a plea and a confession all at once. He kissed her, soft at first, careful, searching, as if afraid she would vanish if he pressed too deeply. But she kissed him back with a tenderness that came from a place she had not meant to open, a place that felt like warmth after too many winters. The storm raged against the glass, but inside the penthouse, the world narrowed to breath and touch and trembling need. Hours later, when the candles melted low and the storm finally softened, they lay tangled in quiet disbelief, the weight of what they had done settling into the fragile space between them. As dawn approached and the glow of early morning filtered through the snow fog, Lena sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. Ethan watched her with a haunted look. She spoke, first voice breaking. "Ethan, we should not have done this." He swallowed hard. "I know." They stared at each other, two people pulled together by a night that felt like fate, but carried the consequences of a secret. neither of them knew how to face. Outside, the storm cleared, but inside the penthouse, a different kind of storm had only just begun. Morning came slowly seeping into the penthouse through a pale wash of winter light that made everything look softer than it truly was. Snow still clung to the glass in uneven patches, and the storm clouds hung low over Manhattan, muting the skyline into a blurred watercolor. The world outside the 90-story window had quieted, but the silence inside the penthouse felt heavier than the blizzard that had locked them together. Lena sat on the edge of the guest room bed with the blanket pulled tightly around her shoulders. Her hair was tousled, her cheeks still flushed with the memory of the night, and her heartbeat felt misplaced somewhere between her throat and her ribs. She stared at her hands, trying to steady her breathing, trying to make sense of the warmth she still felt on her skin. Ethan Hale, the man who had spent 2 years burying himself beneath ritual and routine, had held her last night with a desperation that cut so deep she could still feel the imprint of him in her bones. She pressed her palms against her eyes and let out a shaky breath. This should never have happened. She whispered the words into the quiet room, but they offered no comfort. A soft knock startled her. She looked up expecting him, but no one entered. The knock had been tentative, almost accidental, as if he had changed his mind at the last second. She tightened the blanket around herself, gathered her clothes, and quietly made her way to the bathroom. When she stepped into the hallway a few minutes later, freshly dressed and trying to calm her racing thoughts, she saw Ethan standing in the kitchen. He was facing the counter, his posture tense shoulders, stiff beneath a gray sweater she had never seen him wear before. He turned slightly when he sensed her presence. His eyes flicked to her, then away, and his fingers curled against the counter as if he needed something to hold on to. Lena swallowed. "Good morning." The words felt fragile in her mouth, trembling like something new and breakable. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice rough. "Morning." Silence stretched between them, thick enough to drown in. He glanced at her again, but every time his eyes met hers, he looked away, as though one more second of contact would unravel him further. Lena took a tentative step forward. "About last night." He winced almost imperceptibly. "Yes, we." He stopped, exhaled sharply, tried again. "We crossed a line." The sentence hung in the air like a cold shadow. She lowered her gaze. "I know, I am sorry. I should not have stayed." His head shot up. "Do not apologize. You did nothing wrong. I was the one who—" He stopped again, frustration tightening his jaw. "I should have had more control." The words fell like stones between them. She wrapped her arms around herself, the vulnerability of the moment naked on her face. She had not expected romance. She had not expected promises. But hearing him call it a lapse of control felt like stepping into ice. She forced a breath. "It is fine, Ethan. You do not have to explain." He shook his head. "I do. Because you deserve clarity, and I do not want you to feel used." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. He turned away, bracing his hands on the counter. "I have not let myself touch another person since Emery died. I thought I was past the point of feeling anything real. Then last night happened and I realized I am not the man I should be. I am not ready." She closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the words, their weight pressing into her chest. She stepped backward without meaning, to instinctively wanting to shield herself from the sting of disappointment. "I understand." Her voice was faint. A lie wrapped in politeness. He turned around fully, now his expression pained. "Lena, that is not what I meant. I did not regret being with you. I just regret the circumstances." His honesty made her eyes sting. She forced a small smile that felt brittle. "It is all right, really. You do not owe me anything." Before he could respond, the building lights flickered, humming as the generators shifted power again. The storm warning on the emergency panel beeped. Travel restrictions remain in effect. All residents must remain indoors. Lena exhaled shakily. "I should probably start cleaning. Routine, safe territory, something that did not require emotion." Ethan hesitated before stepping aside. "Of course." As she moved past him, he almost reached out, stopping only inches from touching her arm. His hand hovered in the air, fingers curling, then falling uselessly to his side. She felt that almost touch like a ghost trailing her. For the next hour, she cleaned in silence. Ethan paced around the penthouse, trying to appear calm, but guilt tightened every movement. His regret was not about her. It was about himself. The part of him that still lived in the past. The part of him afraid to let anyone step inside, his frozen grief. When she passed by the West Wing hallway, he stiffened. The ornament boxes sat where they always had. The memories he could not confront. He watched her look toward them, then quickly look away. Something clenched in his chest. He wanted to speak. He wanted to explain. But the words stayed trapped behind fear. Instead, he said the only thing he could manage. "Are you hungry?" She shook her head. "No, thank you." He tried again. "I can make coffee." She blinked at him. "You make coffee." A tiny, almost smile tugged at his lips. "I can press a button on the machine. That counts." Despite everything, she laughed softly, and the sound cracked through his armor, like sunlight through frost. He stepped closer. "Lena, please do not think I regret being with you. I am just not." He paused, swallowing, not complete, not healed. She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Maybe you do not need to be healed to care about someone. Maybe broken people know love better." He inhaled, sharply, chest rising, with something he did not want to feel. "Lena, I cannot, not now." Her smile faltered. "I know." The storm had passed, but the space between them felt more turbulent than the night before. When the travel ban lifted hours later, she gathered her things quietly. She lingered near the door, hoping he might say something that would keep her there. Something small, something human, something brave. Instead, he said nothing. She opened the door, heart sinking. And then just when she stepped into the hallway, he finally whispered, "Lena, wait." She turned slowly. Ethan stood there with his hand braced against the doorframe, eyes filled with regret and longing and fear all tangled together. "I do not want last night to ruin what we have." Her voice broke. "What do we have?" He took a step toward her but stopped halfway. "Something unfinished, something I am not ready for, and something I cannot let go of." The vulnerability in his voice hit her harder than any confession of love could have. She felt tears burn behind her eyes but forced them back. "We will figure it out, or we will not. But I will not break you, Ethan. I will not be another weight you have to carry." He looked at her as if he wanted to reach out, as if he wanted to pull her back inside. But fear won. It always did. She nodded once and left, before either of them could say anything else. As the elevator doors closed between them, the truth settled heavy in both hearts. Last night had changed everything, and neither of them knew how to go back. The days following the storm unfolded with the deceptive quiet of snow melting on pavement, subtle and slow at first, but hiding a far deeper thaw that neither Ethan nor Lena saw coming. On the surface, life returned to its routine. Lena went back to her evening cleaning shifts, moving through the penthouse with the same gentle precision as always. Ethan buried himself in work with renewed intensity, convincing himself that if he kept his hands busy and his mind occupied, he could push the memory of that night into the farthest corner of his thoughts. Yet every time she entered the room, every time he heard the faint sound of her humming, every time their eyes met for a fraction of a second too long, the truth pressed against him like a bruise he could not avoid. Something existed between them now, something too fragile to name and too powerful to ignore. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, to promise. Instead, he told himself that boundaries were necessary. She was an employee. He was still grieving, and reality was not a place where men in his position could allow themselves the luxury of feeling. The fragility of that balance began to crack the moment Raymond Turner stepped into the picture. As CFO of Hale Technologies, Raymond had always been ambitious, but ambition was too polite a word for the hunger in his eyes when he studied Ethan. Raymond had spent years waiting for the perfect moment to undermine the man he secretly envied. Ethan's grief had made the company vulnerable, but Ethan had still been too admired, too powerful, too emotionally untouchable for Raymond to strike without risk. Until now. It began with a whisper in the executive dining room. One of the building's maintenance supervisors mentioned to Raymond that the penthouse had housed an overnight guest during the storm. Raymond feigned polite disinterest, but listened carefully as the supervisor mentioned seeing a young woman get off the private elevator the next morning, wrapped in the billionaire's coat cheeks, flushed hair messy from sleep. Raymond's mind sharpened like a blade drawn from its sheath. Gossip, when aimed correctly, could become ammunition. And ammunition, when delivered to the right platforms, could start wars. He did not know the details, but he did not need them. A single image could ruin a reputation faster than any fact ever could, especially during December, the month when the public devoured scandals like holiday candy. Raymond's plan formed quickly, effortlessly. Step 1, find out if footage existed. Step 2, weaponize it. Step 3, let the board and the public do the rest. It was almost too easy. Hale Tower did not own its own security system. Like most high-end residential skyscrapers in Manhattan, the building relied on Apex Building Security Company, a third-party vendor contracted for surveillance access logs and technical management. Raymond had dealt with Apex many times for corporate offices. He knew their protocols, their vulnerabilities, and most importantly, the people they trusted. Through a whispered favor to a consulting contact, he obtained the name of an Apex junior IT technician who had recently expressed financial trouble. Raymond invited him for a private meeting framed as a confidential company security audit. He did not threaten. He merely implied opportunity. The technician folded like wet paper. Within hours, Raymond had access to the hallway footage outside Ethan's penthouse for a 24-hour window around the storm. He scrubbed through the recordings with rising delight, searching until he found what he needed. At 1:47 a.m., the penthouse door opened. Lena stepped out. She was wrapped in Ethan's coat, her hair falling over her shoulders, her expression soft with exhaustion. She pressed the elevator button with trembling fingers. A few strands of her hair clung to the fabric of the coat. Even in the grainy black and white clip, the implication was unmistakable. The camera angle did the rest, catching the light in a way that made the scene look intimate, secretive, scandalous. Raymond smiled. He downloaded the footage, encrypted it, and sent it anonymously to a gossip Instagram page, notorious for destroying the careers of influencers, celebrities, and the occasional business executive. Accompanying it was a single message: Billionaire Ethan Hale and his maid. The page owner responded within minutes with a string of excited emojis. Raymond leaned back in his office chair, satisfied. The storm inside Hale Tower had only just begun. Back at the penthouse, unaware of the trap tightening around them, Lena finished wiping down the counters, while Ethan sat near the window, reviewing quarterly reports. She glanced at him occasionally, her chest tightening every time their eyes accidentally met. He felt it too. The silent tension, the unfinished thread of a night they both pretended did not exist. She placed the cleaning cloth in her tote and stepped toward the door. "I am done for tonight." Ethan looked up, hesitated, and nodded. "Thank you, Lena." She paused for a heartbeat. He almost said more. Almost, but silence won. Again, she left without looking back. Minutes later, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from his head of public relations. He ignored it at first, but the vibration continued relentlessly until he finally opened the notification. "Sir, are you awake? There is an issue. Someone leaked footage from your building." He froze. Footage? His pulse quickened. What footage? Another message arrived instantly, then another, then another. By the time he clicked the attached video link, his throat had tightened into a hard knot. The clip was only 30 seconds, but 30 seconds was enough to unravel the facade of order he had built around his life, enough to expose Lena, enough to ignite the world. The comments below the post multiplied by the second. Maid mistress, holiday homewrecker, billionaire's secret lover. Ethan slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed across the penthouse. Someone had accessed the building cameras. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone wanted to hurt him. Panic rose in him like a sharp wave, not for himself, but for Lena. She would be the one thrown to the wolves first. The public never hesitated to devour women caught in the orbit of powerful men. He stood abruptly and grabbed his phone, mind racing. Heart pounding. He called building security, demanding explanations, demanding access logs. But Apex was a third-party vendor. Their night team was minimal. Their phones rang without answer. He paced across the penthouse, breath-tight fury, simmering beneath his skin. Then, in a rare moment of clarity, he remembered something from years of working in tech. Third-party systems always log access origin points, IP signatures, device IDs, even when hidden footprints remain. He connected to the building's tenant dashboard using his executive credentials. He dug through submenus most residents never touched, searching until he found the Apex system bridge. And there it was. A single unauthorized access, time-stamped just before the footage was released publicly. The IP address linked back to a workstation registered under the name of Brian Lawton, an Apex technician Ethan recognized from past service appointments. He narrowed his eyes. Why would an Apex tech access his personal hallway feed unless prompted, unless paid? Unless someone inside Hale Technologies had orchestrated it. Raymond Turner's name slashed through his mind like a blade. Ethan inhaled sharply, trembling with the sudden knowledge of betrayal. This was not coincidence. This was not curiosity. This was sabotage, purposeful, targeted, cruel, not just at him, at Lena. And for the first time in 2 years, anger surged through him with a force strong enough to melt the ice around his grief. He whispered to the empty room voice, shaking with fury and fear, "I am going to destroy whoever did this." He just did not know yet that the world would destroy Lena first. The fallout of the leaked footage spread across New York like a winter wildfire burning through social media platforms, tabloids, gossip channels, and late-night talk shows faster than Ethan could even begin to contain. By the time dawn broke the next morning, Lena's face and the grainy clip of her stepping out of his penthouse had been viewed over 8 million times. She did not own a public social media account, but strangers still tracked down old photos from a bakery page, her holiday market stall, and even a blurred family picture that someone had reposted without permission. Comments labeled her everything from opportunist to gold digger to holiday mistress. Cruel words written by people who had never met her and never would. Meanwhile, Ethan's PR team panicked. His assistant left 10 missed calls. Board members demanded emergency meetings. Corporate lawyers warned him to avoid statements and avoid the press. But none of them said the one thing that mattered to him: protect her. When Ethan tried calling Lena, her phone went straight to voicemail. He tried again, and again, nothing. He grabbed his coat and rushed to the elevator, forgetting for the first time in years that stepping outside might expose him to cameras. None of that mattered now. He needed to get to her before the world did. As the elevator descended, a sense of dread built inside him, so fiercely that his chest felt tight, as if a steel band had wrapped itself around his ribs. When the doors opened into the lobby, the noise hit him like a physical blow. Reporters crowded inside, the velvet ropes near the entrance, shouting questions at the security team. Some held up tablets displaying the footage. Others waved microphones wildly, hoping to catch a word from anyone connected to the scandal. Security guards formed a human wall to keep the press from pushing deeper into the building, but the storm of voices bled through. Ethan clenched his jaw and strode through the lobby, ignoring the chaos, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the flashing bulbs that tried to capture every twitch of his expression. He needed to reach the staff elevators downstairs, where Lena usually checked out after her shifts. But halfway across the marble floor, he stopped dead in his tracks. Lena stood near the far side of the lobby, trapped between 3 reporters, who had somehow slipped past the security ropes. She clutched her tote bag, eyes wide, and terrified, her breath shallow, as one of the reporters shoved a phone in her face. "You spent the night in his penthouse. Did he pay you? Are you his holiday girlfriend? Did you plan this to get money?" Lena stumbled backward, shaking her head, her voice cracking. "Please stop. I cannot talk to you. I did nothing wrong." Another reporter snapped a photo inches from her face. She flinched, her knees buckled slightly. Something inside Ethan snapped so violently he was surprised the marble beneath his feet did not crack open. He moved, fast, faster than anyone expected. In seconds he was between Lena and the reporters, his presence towering and furious, his voice sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Back off, now." The reporters stilled, not because they respected him, but because they saw what most of the world had never witnessed: Ethan Hale enraged. His jaw clenched, his fists rigid at his sides, his breath uneven with barely contained fury. "If any of you speak to her again, I will sue every outlet you have ever worked for." The reporters hesitated, then retreated, as security stormed in to escort them out. The crowd of photographers behind the ropes exploded in a frenzy, snapping hundreds of photos as Ethan placed a protective hand on Lena's back. She winced at the sudden contact, but did not pull away. Her eyes flicked up to him, full of fear and relief and shame all tangled together. Ethan softened instantly. "Lena, come with me, please. We need to talk upstairs." She tightened her grip on her tote, trembling. Her cheeks were wet with silent tears she had not even realized had fallen. "I cannot, Ethan. Not here. Not in front of them." He shook his head. "Forget them. Please, just come with me." She took a shaky step back. "I should not even be in your building right now. I came to return your coat before this gets worse." She reached into her tote and pulled out the black coat she had worn in the footage. It was folded neatly as if she had spent hours trying to make it perfect. She placed it gently on the marble table beside them, her hands lingering on it, as though it were the last piece of a memory she wished had never happened. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice low. "Lena, do not do this. I can fix everything, I swear I can." She looked up at him, her expression one of profound heartbreak. "You cannot fix what the world has already decided." Her voice wavered. "Last night was a mistake for you, a decision you regret. But for me, this is my whole life, my job, my reputation, my mother's safety, everything." Reporters shouted behind the ropes. Cameras flashed like lightning in a storm. But for the first time in Ethan's life, the noise outside meant nothing. Only her voice mattered. He stepped closer. "Lena, listen to me. I never regretted being with you. I only regretted hurting you." She shook her head, tears falling again. "No, stop. Do not say things that make it harder. You belong to a world where people survive scandals. I do not. I am just a girl trying to pay rent, a girl who should never have been in your penthouse in the first place. Do you understand what they are calling me online? What they are calling my mother?" Ethan's heart twisted violently. "I will shut it all down. I will protect you. I do not care what it costs. That is the problem," she whispered. "It will cost you, your company, your legacy, your name, and Raymond will use all of this against you." Ethan froze. His blood ran cold. "You know about Raymond." She nodded miserably. One of the janitors overheard him talking to someone on the phone about a leak being the perfect opportunity. I did not know what it meant until this morning. Ethan's fury darkened into something lethal. He wanted to confront Raymond right then, drag him across the lobby floor if he had to. But Lena stepped closer and placed a trembling hand on his chest. "Ethan, please. If you fight him now, the world will assume it is because you are trying to hide something. I cannot let you lose everything because of me." He covered her hand with his own voice breaking. "You are not something to hide. You are not something to be ashamed of." Her breath hitched. "But being near you will destroy me." A loud alarm chimed overhead as the building announced a winter weather advisory for incoming flurries. The sound echoed through the lobby, sharp and metallic, underscoring the moment like the strike of a final bell. Lena gently pulled her hand free. Her eyes were bright with the kind of pain people carry only when they walk away from something they want. She stepped backward toward the staff elevator, her voice barely audible. "I have to leave Ethan, for both of us." He took a desperate step forward, "Lena, wait. Do not." But the elevator doors were already sliding shut. Through the narrowing gap, he saw her whisper one final sentence. "I am sorry." The doors closed. Ethan's composure shattered. He pressed both palms against the steel and lowered his forehead to the cold metal breath, uneven eyes burning. He stayed like that for several agonizing seconds, until he finally pulled back and hit the wall with his fist, the sound echoing through the marble lobby like a crack of thunder. Cameras flashed, voices rose, security rushed toward him. But none of it mattered, because the moment those elevator doors closed, Ethan realized he had not only lost Lena, he had become the man who failed her. And that truth broke something inside him far more deeply than any storm ever could. The lobby emptied slowly after Lena disappeared into the staff elevator, but the chaos she left behind continued to claw at Ethan long after the last camera flash faded. He stood in silence, his breath harsh and uneven, while security tried to clear the crowd outside. Snow drifted past the glass doors in soft spirals, the kind that made the city seem quieter than it was, yet inside him everything roared. Ethan forced himself to return to the penthouse, but the moment the elevator doors closed, the space around him felt suffocating. Her absence echoed louder than the reporters, louder than the scandal, louder than the entire city beneath him. He stepped into the penthouse and felt the coldness immediately. The Christmas lights that Lena had convinced him to plug in for the first time flickered weakly as if they sensed what had happened. The half-decorated tree stood in the corner like a question he no longer had the strength to answer. His phone buzzed, then again and again. He ignored the first 20 notifications from news outlets and social media analysts, but the 21st one came from the chairman of the board. "We need to meet immediately." He exhaled sharply, grabbed a fresh shirt, and splashed cold water on his face before heading back down. The board convened in the private conference suite on the 65th floor. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a perfect view of Manhattan's skyline, but none of the directors looked outside. Their faces were stiff, pale, heavy, with the weight of what they all knew was coming. At the head of the table sat Raymond Caldwell, the CFO, who had been circling Ethan's position since early fall. His expression held a manufactured sympathy that made Ethan's fists clench beneath the table. "Ethan, we appreciate your presence during such a difficult moment." Raymond began folding his hands in front of him. His tone was slick, practiced the voice of a man used to manipulating financial narratives and human ones. Ethan did not speak. He only stared. A projector screen lit up with the same footage from the tabloids. Grainy, distorted, but clear enough to cause a corporation valued at over $40 billion to shudder. A still frame of Lena stepping out of the penthouse. A close-up of Ethan in the background, blurry but undeniably him. A freeze frame of her wearing his coat. The room remained silent until Director Monroe cleared her throat. "Ethan, this is not just bad press. Investors are calling for answers." The market reacted aggressively. We lost 12% in the first trading hour. Ethan clenched his jaw. "I will address the press. I will clarify the situation." Raymond leaned forward. "That is precisely what concerns us. Any attempt to defend her will only worsen the narrative. You will appear compromised, which is why I suggest a controlled statement denying any personal involvement with the staff." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I will not lie. Raymond's smile sharpened. That is unfortunate. The chairwoman exhaled heavily. Ethan, the board has discussed this thoroughly. While we understand you have been struggling personally since your wife passed, the company cannot be tethered to your private life. We are asking for your cooperation. Ethan felt heat rise beneath his skin. And what exactly are you asking? Raymond did not hide the satisfaction in his voice. Step down voluntarily after the holiday quarter ends, effective January 2nd. The words hit Ethan with the weight of a physical impact. He knew what this was. A coup dressed in corporate etiquette. A political execution disguised as concern. They were not asking for an explanation. They were handing him a sentence. Ethan inhaled slowly, steadying himself. What if I refuse? Raymond's smile returned thin and venomous. Then we will initiate a vote of no confidence and remove you publicly. You will lose everything anyway, and the scandal will only grow legs. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at the footage frozen on the screen. Lena's face blurred by motion. Her shoulders hunched under the snowfall. She had been terrified, and now she was the weapon Raymond was using to end him. His throat tightened. It was not fear of losing his company. It was knowing that Lena would blame herself if the world believed she had cost him everything. Ethan placed both hands on the table. Fine, I will resign, but you will not use her name in any internal or external communication. Raymond tilted his head. And if we refuse? Ethan's voice lowered to a cold warning. Then I will go to the press and tell them exactly which executive paid a building contractor to illegally access private security footage. The board members stiffened. Raymond's expression cracked for the first time. Ethan continued. The security logs show the IP access. I know what you did. If my name goes down, yours will burn with it, Monroe whispered. My God. Raymond straightened but said nothing. Ethan rose from his chair. We are done here. He walked out without waiting for permission. The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, the weight of everything crashed into him. His company, his reputation, his life's work. It was all slipping through his fingers like snow caught in a gust of wind. But none of that hurt as much as knowing that Lena believed she was the reason. He returned to the penthouse and stood before the glass windows overlooking the city. Snow drifted past the glass in soft spirals, the kind that made the world feel muffled and distant. He pressed his palm against the cold surface, allowing the truth to settle inside him like frost. He had spent years running from the world, years hiding from grief, years denying himself anything that resembled living. And the first time he reached for something real, the world punished him for it. Or maybe this was not punishment. Maybe it was a price for one night of warmth in a life defined by winter. His phone vibrated again. A news alert flashed across the screen. Breaking Hale Industries. Chief Executive Ethan Hale expected to resign amid holiday scandal. He stared at the headline for several seconds before turning the phone off completely. Not silenced, off. He walked toward the Christmas tree Lena had decorated. There were small ornaments she had found in storage, a red ribbon she had tied to a branch, a single snowflake ornament she had placed near the top because it reminded her of the winters she loved. He touched the ribbon gently, then he whispered into the empty room, I am sorry, Lena, for everything. Outside, the blizzard began to build again. Snow washed over the city in thick sheets muffling sirens and headlights and human noise. New York looked peaceful, almost holy, yet Ethan felt anything but. He stood there for a long time, watching the snow fall in endless white waves, knowing with a hollow ache that he was trapped in a storm he had no power to stop. A storm created by the world, fueled by betrayal, and sealed by the absence of the only person who had ever made winter feel warm. Winter melted into spring before either of them realized how much time had passed, but time did not soften the ache so much as stretch it, turning days into long corridors of what if, and nights into hollow spaces where memories echoed louder than they should have. Lena moved to a small apartment in Queens that smelled faintly of old paint and strong coffee, the kind of place that felt temporary, even though she forced herself to pretend it was home. She kept her boxes stacked neatly in the corner, never fully unpacked, always half ready to run, even if she did not know where she would run to. She found work as a part-time barista, then added a second job cleaning offices at night. But her real refuge became the Community Art Center on 97th Street, a modest building decorated with hand-painted murals by local kids and run by volunteers who believed art could save people in small, quiet ways. She began taking night classes in painting sitting in the back of the room, with her hair tied loosely and her hands still smelling faintly of dish soap or cleaning spray. At first, she painted only what she thought she should paint: bowls of fruit and still life assignments. But slowly she found herself standing in front of a blank canvas, thinking of winter skies, glass towers, and the reflection of snow against city windows. The first painting she created from memory was nothing more than shifting whites and silvers, but underneath those soft colors lay the ghost of a tall building and the silhouette of a woman facing a blizzard with her hands trembling at her sides. Her instructor paused behind her and whispered, "You paint what you cannot say." And Lena had to blink quickly to stop tears from spilling because she knew he was right. She did not say Ethan's name for months, not even once, not to anyone, but he appeared in her art like an echo she could not silence. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan spent the months after his resignation learning how to live without the armor that had protected him for years. Therapy sessions became a weekly routine held in a quiet office near Central Park, with walls painted in warm earth tones and shelves filled with books about grief, trauma, and rebuilding. His therapist was a patient man who rarely interrupted and occasionally asked the kind of questions that made Ethan sit in silence for long minutes before answering. He avoided the news, avoided social gatherings, avoided anything that reminded him of the corporate world he had spent a decade ruling, but he could not avoid the memory of Lena. She had settled somewhere inside him, not as guilt or scandal, but as the one moment in his life when he had felt something real, something warm enough to pierce through the frost he had wrapped around himself since his wife died. For months he walked through the city with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders hunched, as if bracing against wind even when the air was still. On nights when snow returned briefly in late February, he would stand on the balcony of his temporary apartment watching flakes drift down and wondering if she was watching the same sky somewhere else. He kept the ornament she had placed on his Christmas tree, the small wooden snowflake she had tied with a ribbon from the storage box. It became the one object he could not pack away. But life has a way of continuing even when hearts do not want to. Lena's artwork improved dramatically. By summer, she was selling small pieces at weekend street fairs in Brooklyn. Tourists and locals bought her prints often, choosing the ones with winter themes, because they said her snow looked alive like it carried a story. She never corrected them. The art center offered her a scholarship for more advanced courses, and for the first time since the scandal, she allowed herself to feel proud of something again. She laughed more with her classmates, though the laughter always had a soft edge, as if her heart still held a bruise. Ethan, on the other hand, threw himself into charity work. He created the Hail Hope Fund, a foundation originally meant to honor his late wife. But as he shaped its mission, it became something deeper, something tied to what he wished he could change about the world. The foundation funded winter shelters, mental health programs, and community art initiatives across the city. His board membership in several tech companies kept him financially stable, but his life no longer revolved around power. It revolved around fixing things, even if he could not fix the one thing he wanted most. Every December, the city lit up with holiday decorations. Stores blasted Christmas playlists, and trees appeared in apartment windows from Harlem to the Upper East Side. The first holiday season after the scandal hit harder than Ethan expected. He spent Christmas Eve alone in his apartment, staring at the ornaments she had given new meaning. He poured himself a drink, then put it down untouched, because the thought of numbing himself felt like a step backward. Across the river, Lena spent the holiday painting a giant canvas of falling snow. Her mother visited briefly, bringing tamales and a knitted scarf, and hugged her with the kind of tenderness that made Lena bite her lip to keep her emotions contained. Her mother asked gently if she was seeing anyone. Lena smiled softly and lied with a practiced ease. No, Mama, not yet. But that night she stayed awake past midnight, sitting near her small frosted window, watching snowflakes melt against the glass. She whispered a quiet promise to herself that she would not look back anymore, but the ache in her chest told her she had not convinced herself at all. When the first anniversary of the scandal approached, Ethan found himself walking through the city, more often stopping at holiday markets and watching strangers laugh beneath twinkling lights. He wondered if Lena had finally found peace, if she had forgotten the way his name tasted in her mouth, or the way her hands shook when she told him goodbye. He hoped she was happy. He hoped she was safe. But hope and peace are different things. And every time he closed his eyes at night, he still saw her standing at the penthouse window, snow swirling behind her, whispering the sentence that had broken him more than the board ever could. You cannot fix what the world thinks they saw. A year passed, a year without her voice, a year without her presence, a year of trying to rebuild lives that had been shattered on a single winter night. Yet something in the universe shifted as December returned, as if the city itself knew their story was not finished, and the snow began to fall once more. The night of the exhibition arrived, wrapped in the kind of December cold that made every breath feel like steam rising from the soul, the kind of cold that reminded Lena of the winter that had both broken her and rebuilt her. The community gallery in Brooklyn was alive with soft yellow lights, hand-drawn signs, and people bundled in scarves and gloves as they stepped in from the street. Inside the walls were lined with photographs, abstract pieces, and local artwork, but a special section near the center of the room carried the label Light After the Storm, featuring artists whose lives had been reshaped by hardship, loss, or unexpected turning points. Lena stood near the wall where her pieces had been hung, her hands clasped behind her back to keep them from trembling. The room buzzed with low conversation footsteps and the occasional soft laugh. She wore a simple cream sweater and dark trousers, her hair loosely curled in a way that framed her face gently. She had painted 6 pieces for the exhibit, but the one that drew the most attention was the largest canvas she had ever created, titled "The Night the Snow Fell Differently." It showed a city swallowed by a blizzard, a glass tower rising into the storm, and behind the windows, a faint silhouette of someone staring at falling snow, a figure almost invisible unless you looked long enough. People paused in front of it, murmuring about the intimacy of it, the loneliness, the softness of the snow. Lena tried not to stare too long at the painting herself, because every time she did, she felt a familiar ache settle beneath her ribs. As she spoke with a couple admiring her work, the gallery door opened again, and a sudden hush rippled across the room, so subtly she almost missed it. She turned, instinctively expecting another group of visitors, but instead saw a tall figure standing in the doorway, unmoving, as if the entire world had narrowed into this one moment. Ethan. He was dressed in a charcoal coat, dusted lightly with snowflakes. His dark hair slightly tousled from the wind, his expression unreadable, yet overflowing with something raw and unmistakable. For a moment, Lena forgot how to breathe. The man she had spent a year trying not to think about was standing 10 feet away, framed by falling snow, outside the glass door. He took one slow step forward, then another, the soft sound of his shoes on the wooden floor, somehow louder than all the voices in the gallery. Lena's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. When he reached her section of the exhibit, he stopped in front of the large painting. He stared at it with a stillness Lena had never seen in him, not even in the penthouse on the night everything unraveled. His eyes moved slowly across the canvas, taking in every brushstroke, every shadow, every bit of winter she had poured into it. He did not speak, he did not blink, and Lena felt her throat tighten as if all the words she had swallowed for a year were suddenly pressing upward, desperate for release. Finally, he turned toward her. Their eyes met with the force of a memory colliding with the present. She saw grief, longing, regret, and hope all tangled together in his gaze. He took a breath, the kind that seemed to steady a man on the edge of something irreversible. Lena tried to look away, but her body refused to obey. Someone brushed past them, but she felt nothing except him. He stepped closer, his voice low, unsure, almost afraid of breaking the moment. "Are you okay?" The question was simple, yet it carried a year's worth of unsaid apologies. Sleepless nights and frozen memories. Lena swallowed hard. "I tried to be." He exhaled softly as if releasing a weight he had held too long. "You painted this?" he said, flicking his eyes briefly toward the canvas before returning them to her. "It is beautiful, painful, honest." Her voice trembled. "It was the only way I knew how to speak about that night." Ethan nodded slowly, looking as though he might shatter if she said one wrong word. "I did not come here to make anything harder for you. I just wanted to see your work, to see you, and to say that I am sorry in person, not through the silence I hid behind." She felt her breath catch. "Ethan, you do not owe me anything." He shook his head gently. "That is not true. I owe you the truth that you were never the mistake people painted you as. the truth that I should have stopped everything before the world reached for you. The truth that leaving you alone that morning was the worst decision I have ever made. A few people nearby glanced at them, sensing something intense unfolding but politely pretending not to notice. Lena looked down at her hands, then back at him. Her voice softened. It broke me, Ethan. Not the scandal, not the headlines, just losing you without a goodbye. His eyes glistened in the soft gallery light. It broke me too. I spent a year trying to convince myself that staying away was protecting you. But all it did was keep us both frozen in that night. She blinked, her lashes damp. What changed? Ethan took a slow breath, his voice barely above a whisper. I saw the first snow this December and realized it did not hurt as much. And I knew the reason it hurt before was because I had tied winter to loss. But you showed me it could be more. That night with you was the first time winter felt like something worth remembering. Lena felt her legs weaken slightly. She reached for the back of a nearby chair without realizing it. Ethan stepped closer, leaving almost no space between them. His voice dropped even lower, filled with sincerity. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not expect anything at all. I only needed you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Not once. Outside snow began to fall again, drifting in slow, delicate spirals past the gallery window. A soft gasp rippled through the room as people noticed the sudden snowfall. But Lena and Ethan did not turn to look. They were both lost in the fragile gravity of the moment. Lena whispered, her voice cracking. I painted winter because it felt like the only way to keep the memory alive without breaking. Ethan whispered back. I came here because winter was the only way I could find my way back to you. And for the first time in a year, hope flickered between them, like the first light after a storm. The first morning they woke up together again did not feel like a miracle or a movie scene or a grand explosion of fate. It felt quiet, soft, real. The type of morning that arrives after a year of ache and a night of truth. The type that wraps itself around two people like a warm blanket after a long winter. Lena opened her eyes slowly, noticing the pale sunlight slipping through the sheer curtains of the penthouse. A soft winter glow brushing her skin. Snow drifted outside in gentle spirals, painting New York in white silence. For a brief moment she did not move. She simply breathed in the stillness, the warmth, the truth that she was here again, in the same place where everything had shattered and where everything had begun to knit itself back together. Beside her, Ethan lay on his back, one arm resting over his head, the other gently touching the blanket, as if even in sleep he was reaching for her. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythms, and she watched him for a long moment, remembering the man he had been a year ago and the man lying next to her now. A man who had walked through grief, through scandal, through loneliness, and had somehow found his way back to her. She shifted slightly, and his eyes opened immediately, as if her presence pulled him from sleep with ease. He blinked once, then smiled with a softness she had never seen on him before. Morning, he whispered. She felt warmth rise in her chest. Morning. He reached out, brushing his fingers along her jaw. You are here. His voice carried that breathless disbelief of someone receiving something he thought he had lost forever. She leaned into his touch. I am. For the first time in a long time, I want to be. His eyes softened. Stay as long as you want. She smiled gently. That sounds a lot like forever. Ethan shifted closer, pressing his forehead to hers. Then forever it is, but forever can start with breakfast. She laughed quietly against his lips before slipping out of bed and stepping toward the window. The city gleamed under a fresh coat of snow. Every rooftop turned into a blank canvas. Cars crawled slowly along icy streets. Pedestrians bundled themselves in layers as they hurried through the morning chill. New York was alive even in the cold, a reminder that life kept moving, no matter how many times hearts broke or healed. Ethan joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. She rested her hands over his. "It is beautiful," she murmured. "It is more beautiful now," he replied, his voice warm against her neck. They stood there for a while, letting the city unfold beneath them, letting the quiet mornings soften every scar they carried. Then Ethan lifted his head slightly. "Do you trust me?" Lena turned in his arms, her eyes steady. "Yes, always." "Then come with me." He took her hand and led her across the penthouse. She felt her pulse quicken, not from fear but anticipation. He stopped in front of the Christmas tree. It stood taller than either of them, decorated with warm white lights, ribbons of deep red, and ornaments she recognized from the storage box she had unpacked a year ago. But something new hung near the center. A small wooden ornament shaped like a heart, their names carved into it with delicate precision. Lena inhaled softly. "When did you make this?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "I did not make it. I found a craftsman in Vermont who carves custom holiday pieces. I asked him to send it 2 weeks ago. I wanted it ready." She traced the carved letters with her fingers. "Why?" Ethan stepped behind her again, his breath warm against her ear. "Because I want every Christmas from now on to carry your name." Before she could speak, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Lena froze. Her breath caught. Ethan opened the box quietly. Inside was not a ring, but a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny snowflake charm at its center. He held it carefully, almost reverently. "This is not a ring," he said softly. "I am not asking for forever in one leap. I am only asking for today, and tomorrow, and every Christmas after this." Lena's eyes filled instantly. Ethan continued his voice, trembling for the first time she had ever heard. "You changed the way winter feels to me. You brought light into a season I thought I was cursed to relive in darkness. I do not know what the future looks like. I do not know what storms will come. But I know I want to face them with you. Only if you want that too." A single tear slipped down her cheek. She nodded slowly, breathlessly. "I do. I want all of it. Every morning, every storm, every quiet moment." He fastened the bracelet around her wrist with careful fingers, as if sealing a promise neither of them would ever risk breaking. The charm glimmered softly under the tree lights. Ethan cupped her face. "Lena Rivera, you are the first person since my wife passed who made me feel alive again. You gave me back a world I thought was gone." She pressed her forehead to his. "And you gave me a home I never expected to find." Outside, the snow grew heavier, drifting like confetti from the sky, as if the city itself was blessing the beginning of something new. They kissed long and slow, not rushed like desperation, not fragile like fear, but steady like truth. When they finally pulled apart, Lena whispered, almost laughing through her tears, "So this is what the morning after Christmas feels like." Ethan smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "No, this is what love feels like when it finally finds its way home." And together they stood beneath the soft glow of the tree, holding on to each other as the city sparkled beneath a blanket of winter light, knowing that the season that once broke them had become the one that would carry them into a future neither of them would ever forget. If you have made it all the way to this moment, to this last breath of winter light with Lena and Ethan standing beneath the Christmas tree, then I want to speak directly to you heart to heart, because stories like this only matter when someone out there feels them deeply enough to carry them beyond the screen. Tell me something. Have you ever lived through a winter like theirs, a season where the world felt heavy, where you lost something or someone, where you wondered if warmth would ever return? Or maybe you are living through one right now, trying to hold yourself together in a world that pulls at you from every side. Maybe you know exactly what it feels like to stand at a window with snow falling outside and wonder if anyone sees you really sees you. If any part of this story touched you even for a second, I would love to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me which moment stayed with you the longest. Was it the leaked footage that flipped their world upside down? Was it the heartbreak in the lobby when Lena walked away, believing she had no place in his world? Was it the year of silence when both of them learned how to rebuild themselves piece by piece? Or was it the reunion on Christmas night, that fragile, trembling hope that maybe some stories do deserve second chances? Tell me which part felt like it belonged to you. And tell me what winter means in your life. Does it remind you of someone you lost, someone you still love, someone you are still waiting for? Or does winter make you feel alive, like the snow is a reminder that every ending can become a beginning if you let it? And if you believe in it, let me ask you another question. Do you believe in Christmas miracles? Not the kind wrapped in ribbons or shown in movies, but the quiet ones, the soft ones, the ones that show up when you are not expecting them. The kind that feel like forgiveness, the kind that feel like coming home to yourself after a long time away. If you do, tell me why, and if you do not, tell me what made you stop believing. This channel exists because of people like you, people who still believe in love, healing, redemption, and the idea that even broken hearts deserve mornings like the one Lena and Ethan found. If you want more stories like this, stories filled with emotion and depth and characters who feel like they could walk straight out of your phone or laptop, then make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. There is a new story coming tomorrow and the next day, and the next, because somewhere out there, someone needs a reminder that love can still show up in unexpected places, even in the middle of a storm. And before you go, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Share your city, your country, your corner of the world. Every time someone comments, it feels like our little community becomes a little warmer, a little brighter, a little more alive. Finally, I want you to answer this one last question. If you were Lena standing in that gallery, and if someone you once loved walked toward you again after a year of silence, would you stay? Would you turn away? Would you give them a chance to explain? Or would you walk into the future with them the way she did? There is no right answer, only your answer. I cannot wait to read what you share. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling this story. And wherever you are tonight, may your winter be gentle, your heart be soft, and may your next morning be filled with exactly the light you need.